I can't do this. Oliver's hands trembled as he stared at the woman across from his desk. Riley Walsh. The girl who'd made his 16-year-old heart race, now sitting in his office like a ghost from his past. Is there a problem with the terms? Riley's voice was professional, detached. No flicker of recognition in those warm brown eyes. $15,000 to hire the woman he'd been in love with since high school to pretend to be his girlfriend. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. Riley, he said carefully, do you remember going to Lincoln High? Her expression didn't change. Big school. Lots of familiar faces around Seattle. She didn't remember him. Of course she didn't. He'd been invisible then, the quiet kid who fixed computers while she was everything bright and beautiful and untouchable. The fee is acceptable, Oliver managed. When can we start? But as Riley gathered her papers, he caught something in her eyes, a flicker, a hesitation, that made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, she remembered more than she was letting on. Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives, where love gets a second chance. Hit subscribe because this story will make you believe in destiny. When the past collides with a desperate present, can love survive the masquerade? Now let's get back to the story. The notification sound from Oliver's phone cut through the silence of his corner office like a blade. Another mention. Another share. Another comment on the video that was currently destroying his life one view at a time. #marriages code was trending worldwide. Oliver set his phone face down on his mahogany desk and tried to focus on the quarterly reports spread before him. The number should have been cause for celebration. HeartSync's user base had grown by 40% in the last 6 months, their algorithm's success rate had improved to an industry-leading 94%, and their app was being hailed as revolutionary in relationship technology. Instead, those same numbers felt like a countdown to disaster. The irony wasn't lost on him. HeartSync could predict relationship compatibility with scientific precision, help couples navigate everything from first dates to family planning, and even suggest conversation topics based on personality analysis. The app was a masterpiece of behavioral psychology and data science. 5 years of his life poured into code that actually helped people find lasting love. Too bad their CEO had just become the internet's favorite example of everything wrong with modern dating. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting his spiral into self-recrimination. Mr. Jones? The Henderson Group is holding on line 3. Mr. Henderson sounds concerned. Oliver's stomach dropped. Bob Henderson wasn't just any client, he was the client. Henderson Group represented a $200 million partnership that would launch HeartSync from successful startup to household name. Their Family Values Corporation had been courting Oliver for months, impressed by both the technology and what they perceived as his commitment to helping families thrive. Tell them I'll call back in 10 minutes, Oliver said, buying himself time he didn't have. He pulled up the video that had started this nightmare. There he was, 3 days ago at the Tech Innovation Summit, looking confident and professional as he fielded questions about HeartSync's future. The interviewer had asked about his personal life, whether using his own app had helped him find love. Oliver watched his recorded self lean back in the conference chair, that slight smile playing at his lips that always appeared when he was about to make what he thought was a clever point. Marriage is just bad code that hasn't been debugged yet, his recorded voice said with the kind of casual confidence that made present Oliver want to crawl under his desk. Smart people iterate, they don't commit to permanent solutions. Why would I lock myself into version 1.0 when version 2.0 might be exponentially better? The audience had laughed. The interviewer had nodded appreciatively. Oliver had thought he was being witty, demonstrating his analytical approach to relationships. Instead, he'd handed the internet a perfect soundbite for everything cynical about modern love. The comments section was brutal. Thousands of people sharing their own heartbreak stories, calling him everything from emotionally stunted to the reason dating apps are ruining romance. Relationship bloggers were writing think pieces about toxic masculinity in tech. His own app's user reviews were plummeting as people questioned whether they wanted dating advice from someone who clearly didn't believe in love. Oliver's phone buzzed with a text from his CFO. Emergency board meeting. Conference room. Now. The walk down the hall felt like a death march. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Oliver could see his entire executive team huddled around laptops, their faces grim. Charts and graphs covered the smart board, all trending downward. 12%. Announced Sarah Chin, his CFO, the moment Oliver walked through the door. Stock price dropped 12% since yesterday. 3 major investors have requested emergency calls. Henderson Group just moved their decision timeline up. They want an answer about the partnership by Monday. Monday? Oliver sank into his chair. That's 4 days away. Gets worse, added Marcus Webb, his head of marketing. BuzzFeed just published an article titled, "Is this tech bro the reason you're still single?" It's been shared 60,000 times in the last hour. Oliver's head of PR, Jennifer Liu, looked up from her laptop with the expression of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. Twitter is calling for a boycott. #DeleteHeartSync is gaining traction. We're hemorrhaging users. The room fell silent except for the soft clicking of keyboards and the distant hum of Seattle traffic 23 floors below. Options? Oliver asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answers. Damage control, Sarah said immediately. Something dramatic that shows you understand relationships aren't just algorithms and data points. A public apology, suggested Marcus. Jennifer shook her head. Too little, too late. The internet doesn't forgive, it just moves on to the next target. We need something that fundamentally changes the narrative. Like what? A girlfriend, Jennifer said bluntly. Someone wholesome, relatable, who makes you look like you actually understand love. Someone who can stand beside you at the Henderson Group retreat and prove that the CEO of a relationship app isn't a complete emotional disaster. Oliver stared at her. You want me to find a girlfriend in 4 days? I want you to save your company, Sarah interjected. Henderson Group isn't just about money, Oliver. They're about family values, generational thinking, building something that lasts. Right now, you represent everything they're against. But if you show up to their retreat with someone special, Jennifer continued, someone who clearly adores you and believes in what you've built, it changes everything. It proves that HeartSync works, that you're not just some cynical tech guy who thinks love is disposable. Oliver laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. Because nothing says authentic like a manufactured relationship for business purposes. It doesn't have to be manufactured, Marcus offered weakly. Marcus, I haven't been on a successful date in 8 months. My last relationship ended because she said I treated romance like a software problem that needed solving. Where exactly am I supposed to find this perfect girlfriend who's going to save my company? The room fell quiet again. Oliver could practically hear his career circling the drain. That's when Janet spoke up. Janet Morrison had been Oliver's executive assistant for 3 years. She was efficient, unflappable, and had an uncanny ability to solve problems that seemed impossible. She rarely spoke in meetings unless directly addressed, which made her quiet voice from the corner of the room all the more attention-grabbing. There are services, she said matter-of-factly, not looking up from her tablet. Professional services that handle exactly this kind of situation. Every head in the room turned toward her. What kind of services? Sarah asked. Companion services. Stand-in partners for events, family gatherings, business functions. Janet's tone was completely professional, as if she were discussing catering options. They're actors essentially. Trained to play whatever role the situation requires. Oliver felt something cold settle in his chest. You want me to hire a fake girlfriend? I want you to hire a solution, Janet replied calmly. The Henderson Group retreat is this weekend. Spouses and partners invited. Company leadership expected to demonstrate the family values that Henderson Group represents. She slid her tablet across the conference table. This could solve everything. Oliver stared at the screen. A discreet website, professional headshots, testimonials from satisfied clients who'd needed dates for weddings, corporate events, family reunions. The tagline read, "When life requires a performance, we provide the perfect cast." This is insane, he said. This is business, Sarah corrected. Oliver, HeartSync is worth $50 million right now. With the Henderson partnership, it could be worth $500 million. Are you really going to let pride destroy everything you've built? Oliver looked around the room at the faces of people who'd believed in his vision, who'd worked 60-hour weeks to build something revolutionary, who were now watching their stock options evaporate because their CEO had made one spectacularly stupid comment. How does it work? He asked quietly. Janet pulled up another screen. Consultation first. They match you with someone appropriate for your specific needs. Professional, discreet, completely confidential. The fee varies depending on the complexity and duration of the engagement. And they're good at this? Convincing. The testimonials suggest they're very good, Janet said. These aren't amateurs, Oliver. They're trained professionals who understand that their job is to make you look good. Jennifer leaned forward, her marketing mind clearly spinning. It could actually work. Show up to the retreat with someone charming and appropriate. Let Henderson Group see that you're capable of a committed relationship. Prove that HeartSync CEO practices what he preaches. What happens after the weekend? Oliver asked. When people start asking questions about this mysterious girlfriend? You figure that out later, Sarah said firmly. Right now we're in crisis mode. We need to stop the bleeding, secure the Henderson partnership, and stabilize the stock price. Everything else is secondary. Oliver closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining this to his parents, to his college friends, to anyone with a functioning moral compass. He was considering hiring someone to pretend to love him so he could convince a conservative corporation that he understood relationships. The universe really did have a twisted sense of humor. Set up the consultation, he said finally. The relief in the room was palpable. Sarah nodded approvingly, Jennifer immediately started typing notes, and Marcus began pulling up damage control strategies. Only Janet remained calm, already reaching for her phone. I'll have someone here tomorrow afternoon, she said. Professional, appropriate for your demographic, available for weekend travel. As the meeting dispersed and his team scattered to implement their crisis management plan, Oliver remained in the conference room, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there was a woman who would spend the weekend pretending to be in love with him for money. He wondered what she would think of the man who'd built an app to help people find real love but couldn't manage to find it himself. He wondered if she'd be convincing enough to fool Bob Henderson and his family values empire. Most of all, he wondered how he'd ended up here, successful, wealthy, and so fundamentally alone that he was about to pay someone to fake the one thing his app promised to deliver. If you're enjoying this story of second chances and unexpected love, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to face someone from your past in the most unexpected way? Let's keep this story going together. 3 days later, Oliver sat in his corner office, adjusting his tie for the third time and checking his reflection in the dark window. The consultation appointment was scheduled for 3 o'clock. Janet had assured him the woman was professional, discreet, and available for immediate engagement. He'd spent the morning reviewing HeartSync's user data, trying to distract himself from the surreal reality of what he was about to do. The numbers were still declining, though the rate had slowed slightly. Henderson Group had confirmed their expectation that he'd attend the retreat with his partner, and the subtle emphasis Bob Henderson had placed on that word suggested that Oliver's relationship status was very much under scrutiny. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Come in. The door opened and Oliver's world tilted off its axis. She stood in the doorway like a memory made flesh, long dark hair, warm brown eyes, that same confident smile that had made his 16-year-old heart stutter and race. Riley Walsh. The girl who'd sat 2 seats ahead of him in AP Physics, who'd explained quantum mechanics using candy metaphors, who'd been kind to the awkward tech kid when she could have ignored him entirely. She looked exactly the same, only more beautiful, more poised, more everything that had made her seem impossibly out of reach in high school. Oliver Jones? Her voice was professional, friendly, with no flicker of recognition. I'm Riley. Janet mentioned you needed someone for a corporate event. The universe, Oliver realized, had an absolutely twisted sense of humor. Oliver forgot how to breathe. Riley Walsh stepped into his office with the same quiet confidence she'd carried in high school, but now it was polished, professional. She wore a tailored navy blazer over dark jeans, her hair falling in soft waves past her shoulders. A leather portfolio was tucked under one arm, and she moved with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in corporate spaces. She was beautiful. She'd always been beautiful, but 15 years had refined that beauty into something that made Oliver's chest tighten with recognition and longing and the sharp ache of roads not taken. Please sit, he managed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where investors and CEOs usually sat, where Riley Walsh was now settling with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. She pulled out a sleek tablet and stylus, her movements precise and businesslike. So, tell me about the event. Janet mentioned it's a corporate retreat. Her voice was exactly the same, warm, intelligent, with that slight rasp that had made his teenage heart race whenever she'd asked to borrow his calculator in physics class. But there was something different now, a professional polish that hadn't been there at 17. Yes, Oliver said, his own voice sounding strange to his ears. Weekend retreat. Corporate partnership. They're traditional. Family-focused. Riley nodded, making notes on her tablet. Timeline? This weekend. Friday evening through Sunday morning. Location. Pine Ridge Resort. About 2 hours north of the city. Accommodation arrangements? Oliver felt heat crawl up his neck. Shared suite. They'll expect us to be together. If the sleeping arrangements fazed her, she didn't show it. Riley simply made another note, her expression remaining perfectly professional. Backstory, she continued. How long have we been together? How did we meet? What's our relationship dynamic? Oliver stared at her, still struggling to process the impossibility of this moment. Riley Walsh, the girl he'd been half in love with since sophomore year, was sitting in his office discussing the logistics of pretending to be his girlfriend. I hadn't really thought about the details, he admitted. That's fine, I'm good at improvisation. But basics help. She looked up from her tablet and for just a moment, Oliver caught something in her expression. A flicker of something sharper, more personal. What kind of couple are we supposed to be? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Oliver wasn't sure how to navigate. Professional, he said quickly. Career-focused. Mutual respect, shared goals. Riley made another note. And your actual relationship history? I'll need to know what topics to avoid, what might come up in conversation. How was he supposed to explain that his relationship history consisted of a series of short-lived connections with women who'd found his work more interesting than his personality? That he'd never brought anyone to a corporate event because he'd never been with anyone long enough to warrant introductions? Limited, he said finally. Something flickered across Riley's face, surprise, maybe curiosity, but her professional mask slipped back into place immediately. That's perfectly fine. We'll keep the backstory simple and believable. She set down her stylus and looked directly at him. What level of physical intimacy are you comfortable with? Oliver's brain short-circuited. What? Public displays of affection, she clarified with the patience of someone who'd explained this before. Hand-holding, casual touches, how we interact in social situations. Some clients prefer minimal contact, others need the full devoted couple performance. It depends on your audience and comfort level. She was discussing physical contact with him like it was a business metric, a variable to be optimized. Meanwhile, Oliver was dying inside, trying to process the fact that Riley Walsh was negotiating the terms of touching him. The audience is conservative, he managed. They'll expect believable affection. Believable, she repeated, making a note. I can work with that. Oliver watched her write, studying the familiar curve of her handwriting, the way she tilted her head slightly when concentrating. She'd done the same thing in physics class, bent over problem sets with that same focused intensity. Riley, he said suddenly. She looked up, eyebrows raised in polite inquiry. Do you remember going to Lincoln High? For just a moment, something shifted in her expression. Her pen paused mid-stroke, and Oliver caught a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath the professional veneer. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. Big school, she said lightly, returning to her notes. Lots of familiar faces around Seattle. The dismissal stung more than Oliver had expected. Of course she didn't remember him. He'd been invisible then, the quiet kid who fixed computers and built robots while she'd been everything bright and popular and untouchable. Right, he said quietly. Of course. Riley finished her notes and looked up with renewed professional focus. Fee structure is $15,000 for the weekend, including travel, wardrobe consultation, and full performance. Half up front, half on completion. Are you comfortable with those terms? $15,000 to spend a weekend with Riley Walsh. His teenage self would have called it a bargain at twice the price. His adult self knew it was probably the most expensive mistake he'd ever make. Yes, he said. Excellent. She stood, extending her hand for a professional shake. I'll send you a detailed questionnaire. Favorite foods, hobbies, basic biographical information. The more details I have, the more convincing we'll be. Her hand was warm, her grip confident and firm. Oliver held on a fraction too long before catching himself and letting go. One more thing, Riley said, pausing at the door. This stays completely confidential, obviously. But I should mention that I do background research on all my clients. Standard procedure. Oliver nodded, though something in her tone made him wonder what exactly she might find. I'll be in touch about the travel arrangements, she continued. And Oliver? Yes. Try to relax. I'm very good at what I do. And then she was gone, leaving Oliver alone with the lingering scent of her perfume and the earth-shattering realization that he'd just hired his high school crush to pretend to be in love with him. Are you feeling the tension? Drop a heart in the comments if you think Oliver should tell Riley the truth about recognizing her. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to get even more complicated. The door clicked shut and Oliver sank back into his chair, staring at the space where Riley had been sitting. His hands were shaking slightly, and he pressed them flat against his desk to steady them. Riley Walsh. After 15 years, she'd walked back into his life as if summoned by some cosmic joke. The girl who'd made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he was interesting enough to deserve her attention. The girl he'd never worked up the courage to ask to prom, who'd graduated and disappeared into college and adult life while he'd stayed behind, nursing a crush that had never quite faded. And now she was a professional stand-in girlfriend who didn't remember him at all. Oliver pulled out his phone and did something he'd resisted for years. He searched for Riley Walsh on social media. Her profiles were sparse, professional. A LinkedIn page that listed her as an event consultant and personal services coordinator. A few photos from corporate events, always smiling, always with different people who were clearly clients rather than friends. No relationship status. No personal photos. No glimpse into who Riley Walsh had become beyond the polished professional who just negotiated the terms of fake loving him for money. His computer chimed with an incoming email. The questionnaire, already perfectly formatted and comprehensive. Riley worked fast. Oliver stared at the questions, each one a small window into the person he'd need to pretend to be for Riley. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built an app that asked similar questions to help people find genuine compatibility, and now he was filling out a form to manufacture fake compatibility with the one person he'd never needed an algorithm to love. He started typing, crafting responses that were true but carefully edited. Favorite food? Thai. He didn't mention that he'd started ordering pad thai in high school because Riley had mentioned loving it. Hobbies? Rock climbing, chess, cooking. All true, though he'd barely touched his climbing gear since starting HeartSync. Most embarrassing moment. He wrote and deleted a dozen responses before settling on something generic about a presentation mishap. The real answer, building a robot that malfunctioned during the science fair and started reciting Shakespeare while Riley Walsh watched from the audience, felt too revealing, too much like the person he'd been when he'd known her before. His phone buzzed with a text from Janet. How did the consultation go? Fine, he typed back. She'll work. It was the understatement of the century. Another email arrived, this one with Riley's own questionnaire responses. Oliver opened it with the desperate hunger of someone who'd been wondering about Riley Walsh for 15 years. Oliver read through her responses twice, searching for clues about who she'd become. The girl who'd wanted to be a travel photographer but had ended up as a professional fake girlfriend. The woman who valued honesty above all else but made her living in carefully constructed deceptions. There were glimpses of the Riley he remembered. The curiosity, the intelligence, the dry sense of humor that had made her laugh at his terrible science jokes. But there were shadows too, careful omissions and professional distance that suggested she'd learned to guard herself in ways that 17-year-old Riley never had. His computer chimed again. Another email from Riley, this one with a subject line that made his heart race. Additional research. Oliver, I've completed my standard background review. Impressive company, solid reputation, no red flags. I did notice some interesting coincidences in our educational backgrounds, but I'm sure it's nothing significant. Looking forward to working with you this weekend. Best, Riley. Oliver stared at the message, reading between the lines. Interesting coincidences in our educational backgrounds. She knew. Maybe she'd known from the moment she'd walked into his office, or maybe she'd figured it out during her research. Either way, Riley Walsh remembered him. And she was choosing to pretend she didn't. The question was why. Was she being professional, maintaining boundaries between her personal history and her work? Was she embarrassed by their shared past? Or was there something else, something more complicated that Oliver couldn't begin to guess? His phone rang, interrupting his spiral of speculation. Janet's voice was crisp and efficient. The Henderson Group just confirmed the weekend schedule, she said. Arrival Friday at 6, cocktail reception at 7:30, dinner at 8. Saturday includes team-building activities, a group hike, and formal dinner with dancing. Sunday morning brunch and departure. Team-building activities? Oliver asked weakly. Trust exercises, partner challenges, that sort of thing. Very hands-on, very intimate. Oliver closed his eyes. Trust exercises with Riley Walsh. Partner challenges that would require them to work together, touch each other, maintain the fiction of being in love while navigating activities designed to test real couples. Sir? Janet's voice cut through his panic. Should I confirm your attendance? Oliver looked out his office window at the Seattle skyline, at the city where he'd built a successful company and a carefully ordered life. In 3 days, he'd be at a mountain resort with Riley Walsh, pretending to be in love while trying not to reveal that he'd been halfway there since he was 16. Confirm it, he said. Excellent. I'll send the final details to both you and Riley. After Janet hung up, Oliver sat in his office as the afternoon light faded into evening, thinking about the girl who'd explained quantum physics using gummy bears and the woman who'd just agreed to fake love him for $15,000. Oliver had a feeling that by Sunday morning, everything would be different. He just wasn't sure if that terrified him or thrilled him more. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Seattle clarity that made the mountains look close enough to touch. Oliver stood in his bedroom, staring at his open suitcase like it contained explosives rather than carefully selected weekend attire. Business casual for the arrival. Hiking clothes for Saturday's outdoor activities. Something nice for the formal dinner. Everything Riley might need to know about Oliver Jones, successful CEO who definitely had his life together and certainly wasn't spiraling over spending 48 hours pretending to be in love with his teenage crush. His phone buzzed with a text from Riley, Airport. Gate B12. See you at 2:30. Professional. Efficient. No hint of the woman who'd once spent an entire lunch period explaining why she thought black holes were basically the universe's recycling system, her eyes bright with the kind of curiosity that had made Oliver fall for her in the first place. Oliver grabbed his bag and headed for the door, trying to ignore the way his heart rate spiked at the thought of seeing her again. The airport was crowded with Friday afternoon travelers, but Oliver spotted Riley immediately. She sat near their gate, absorbed in something on her tablet, wearing dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look impossibly young. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she had the kind of effortless elegance that came from being comfortable in her own skin. When she looked up and spotted him, her smile was warm and automatic, the kind of expression that looked genuine even though he knew it was performance. "Ready for this?" she asked, standing to greet him. Oliver nodded, not trusting his voice. Up close, she smelled like vanilla and something floral that made his chest tighten with recognition. "I've been thinking about our backstory," Riley continued, settling back into her seat and pulling out her tablet. "We should probably coordinate our stories before we land." "Right. Good thinking. How long have we been together?" Oliver had been dreading this question. 6 months. It seemed reasonable, long enough to be serious, short enough to explain why she'd never come up in conversation before. "Perfect. How did we meet?" "Coffee shop," he suggested weakly. Riley shook her head, stylus poised over her screen. "Too cliché. What about work?" "I'm a consultant. You needed help with user experience design for HeartSync. Professional relationship that turned personal. It was brilliant actually. Close enough to the truth to feel natural, detailed enough to answer follow-up questions, and it explained why Riley understood his business so well." "That works," Oliver said, impressed despite himself. "What made you fall for me?" she asked, her tone completely businesslike. Oliver's brain went blank. What was he supposed to say? That he'd been halfway in love with her since she was 16? That she'd made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was interesting enough to deserve her attention? "You're smart," he said finally. "You challenge me intellectually. You make me laugh." Riley made a note, nodding approvingly. "What made me fall for you?" This was somehow worse. Oliver stared at her, completely at a loss. "You're brilliant," Riley said quietly, her professional mask slipping just slightly. "You built something amazing, something that actually helps people find love. You're kind without making a big deal about it. You remember details that matter to people." She paused, her cheeks going slightly pink. "Also, you have excellent taste in Thai food." Oliver stared at her. "How did you know about?" "Lucky guess," she said quickly, but her blush deepened. "Should we practice some basic couple behavior? Physical contact, that kind of thing?" Before he could respond, she'd reached over and taken his hand, threading their fingers together with easy familiarity. Her palm was warm, her grip confident, and Oliver felt like he was 16 again and utterly out of his depth. "This okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he managed. "Completely fine." Riley's smile was soft, almost fond. "You always were terrible at lying, Oliver." The words slipped out so naturally that it took a moment for their implication to register. Riley's eyes widened slightly as if she'd surprised herself. "I mean," she said quickly, "you have very honest eyes. It's going to make this weekend interesting." Their flight was called before Oliver could figure out how to respond, but as they boarded the plane, Riley's hand still casually linked with his, he began to suspect that this weekend was going to change everything. The flight to the mountain resort was short but turbulent, both meteorologically and emotionally. Riley had claimed the window seat and spent most of the journey reviewing what appeared to be detailed notes about Henderson Group's corporate culture and key personnel. Bob Henderson, CEO, married to Sandra for 28 years, 3 kids, all involved in the family business, she murmured, scrolling through her research. Conservative values, big on tradition and stability. His daughter Emma just got engaged, expect lots of wedding talk. Oliver watched her work, fascinated by her thoroughness. You really do your homework. Details matter, Riley replied without looking up. The difference between a convincing performance and an obvious fake is usually in the small things. Like knowing that Sandra Henderson volunteers at the animal shelter and will probably ask about our pets, or that their son Michael just started his MBA and might want career advice. We don't have pets, Oliver pointed out. We're thinking about getting a dog, Riley said smoothly. Maybe after we move in together. The casual way she said, move in together, made Oliver's stomach flip. Even fake future planning with Riley felt dangerously real. Speaking of which, Riley continued, we should probably discuss our timeline. How serious are we? Are we talking about marriage? Kids? Oliver nearly choked on his coffee. Are we? That depends on what story sells best to your audience. Riley finally looked at him, her expression thoughtful. Conservative Family Values Corporation, right? They'll want to see commitment, stability, long-term thinking. So we're serious. We're serious, she confirmed. Not engaged yet, but heading in that direction. We've talked about the future, we're compatible on the big issues, we're taking our time but we're committed. She made it sound so reasonable, so natural. Oliver found himself nodding along, caught up in the fiction they were creating. What about the physical stuff? He asked, then immediately regretted the phrasing. Riley raised an eyebrow. What about it? I mean, how much contact is believable? For a couple who's been together 6 months and is serious about each other. Casual intimacy, Riley said matter-of-factly. Hand-holding, sitting close, occasional touches. Nothing dramatic, but enough to show we're comfortable with each other. She paused, studying his face. Are you okay with that? I know some people have issues with physical contact. Oliver thought about Riley's hand in his, the way she touched his arm during their conversation, the prospect of spending an entire weekend in close physical proximity to the woman he'd been dreaming about for 15 years. I can handle it, he said. Riley's smile was knowing. We'll see. If you're getting butterflies just watching them plan this fake relationship, smash that like button. Comment below. Do you think Oliver can really handle pretending with Riley? This is about to get so much more intense. The resort appeared through the airplane window like something from a postcard. Rustic luxury nestled among towering pines, with the kind of carefully curated charm that cost serious money to achieve. Oliver could see other guests arriving, couples and families unloading luggage from expensive cars, everyone looking relaxed and successful and genuinely happy to be there. Showtime, Riley murmured as they descended toward the small regional airport. The rental car was waiting as promised, a sleek SUV that screamed, successful couple on a romantic getaway. Riley slid into the passenger seat with easy familiarity, immediately connecting her phone to the sound system and pulling up directions. 2 hours to the resort, she announced. Perfect time to get our story straight. The drive through the mountains was beautiful, all winding roads and spectacular views, but Oliver was too nervous to appreciate the scenery. Riley, meanwhile, seemed completely relaxed, asking questions about his childhood, his college years, his early career, all the details a girlfriend of 6 months would reasonably know. Favorite movie? She asked as they navigated a particularly scenic stretch of highway. The Princess Bride, Oliver admitted. Riley laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Of course it is. You always did love stories about underdogs winning through cleverness rather than strength. Oliver nearly drove off the road. You remember that? Riley went very still, as if she'd said something she hadn't meant to. I mean, it fits your personality type. Analytical, strategic, rooting for the smart guy. But Oliver had caught the slip, the moment when her professional mask had fallen away to reveal something real underneath. Riley Walsh remembered more about him than she was letting on. The question was why she was pretending not to. They reached Pine Ridge Resort just as the sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that would have been romantic if this were real. The main lodge was all natural wood and stone, with warm light spilling from the windows and the kind of rustic elegance that suggested both comfort and serious money. Beautiful, Riley said softly, and for a moment she sounded like the girl who'd once talked about wanting to photograph sunsets around the world. Yeah, Oliver agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the scenery. The check-in process was smooth and professional, with the kind of discreet luxury that made everything seem effortless. The receptionist, a cheerful woman in her 50s, beamed at them as she handed over key cards. Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Welcome to Pine Ridge. You're in the Cascade Suite, Beautiful mountain views, king bed, private balcony. Perfect for a romantic getaway. King bed. Oliver had known this intellectually, had even specified it when making the reservation. But hearing it said aloud, with Riley standing beside him wearing a soft smile and looking every bit the devoted girlfriend, made it suddenly devastatingly real. Sounds perfect, Riley said warmly, her hand finding Oliver's arm in a gesture that looked completely natural. We're so excited to be here. Dinner starts at 6:30 in the main lodge, the receptionist continued. There's a welcome cocktail hour beforehand if you'd like to mingle with the other guests. In the elevator, Riley studied the weekend schedule with professional interest. Couples massage tomorrow morning, followed by team trust exercises and a group hike. Formal dinner and dancing tomorrow night. She glanced up at him. Hope you've been practicing your dance moves. I don't dance, Oliver said automatically. Everyone dances at corporate retreats, Riley replied. It's like a law of physics. But don't worry, I'll lead. Their suite was exactly as advertised, beautiful, intimate, and absolutely designed for people who actually wanted to share a bed. The king-size bed dominated the space, flanked by matching nightstands and facing a stone fireplace that would have been romantic if this were real. Riley set her bag down and surveyed the room with the practical eye of someone who'd clearly done this before. Bathroom schedule? She asked. You first, Oliver said, grateful for the mundane logistics. I'll unpack. While she was gone, Oliver tried to make the space feel less intimate by arranging his things in careful, neutral piles. His laptop on the desk, his phone charger on the far nightstand, his clothes hung in the section of closet farthest from where Riley's dresses were already hanging. When she emerged from the bathroom, changed into a simple black dress that was simultaneously appropriate and devastating, Oliver felt his carefully constructed composure wobble. Ready to meet your future business partners? She asked, checking her reflection in the mirror one last time. Oliver straightened his tie and tried to look like a man who definitely had his life together. As ready as I'll ever be. Riley moved to stand in front of him, reaching up to adjust his collar with the casual intimacy of a longtime girlfriend. Her fingers brushed against his neck, and Oliver had to concentrate on breathing normally. Remember, she said softly, her face close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, we're professionally smitten but not nauseating about it. Comfortable with each other but not putting on a show. Got it? Oliver managed. Riley smiled, the expression warm and genuine and absolutely devastating. Then let's go fall in love. As they headed for the door, Oliver caught their reflection in the mirror, a successful, attractive couple heading out for an evening of networking and romance. They looked perfect together, like they belonged in each other's lives. For a moment, Oliver allowed himself to imagine that it was real. Then Riley's hand slipped into his, warm and confident and completely professional, and he remembered that this was just another performance in a life that had become very good at beautiful lies. The cocktail hour awaited, along with 43 Henderson Group employees who would spend the weekend evaluating whether Oliver Jones was the kind of man who understood love. The main lodge buzzed with the kind of controlled energy that came from mixing business with pleasure. 43 Henderson Group employees and their spouses mingled around a massive stone fireplace, drinks in hand, everyone dressed in that careful balance of casual and polished that screamed corporate retreat. Oliver paused in the doorway, Riley's hand warm in his, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. This was it, the moment when their carefully constructed fiction would be tested by real people with real expectations. Relax, Riley murmured, her thumb brushing across his knuckles in what looked like an affectionate gesture. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. I feel like I am, Oliver admitted. Riley's laugh was soft and genuine. Trust me. I've got this. She guided him into the room with the confidence of someone who belonged anywhere she chose to be. Within minutes, she'd seamlessly inserted them into a conversation about weekend hiking trails, her hand resting lightly on Oliver's arm as she asked thoughtful questions about the local wildlife. You must be Oliver. A woman in her 50s approached with the kind of warm smile that suggested genuine friendliness rather than corporate politeness. I'm Sandra Henderson. Bob's told me so much about you and your company. Mrs. Henderson, it's wonderful to meet you. Oliver shook her hand, grateful for the familiar territory of business introductions. This is Riley, my girlfriend. Please call me Sandra. She turned to Riley with obvious interest. And how did you two meet? Bob mentioned Oliver's been quite secretive about his personal life. Riley's smile was warm and natural. Work actually. I was consulting on user experience design for HeartSync. Oliver kept challenging every recommendation I made. I was not challenging, Oliver protested, surprised to find himself settling into the familiar rhythm of their old debates. I was asking for data to support your suggestions. Same thing, Riley said, grinning up at him. He's very thorough. Obsessive, Oliver corrected. Thorough, she repeated firmly, and the look she gave him was warm enough to make him forget, for just a moment, that this was performance. Sandra laughed, the sound delighted. You can tell when couples really know each other. There's a comfort there, a shorthand. She leaned closer conspiratorially. Between you and me, some of the younger employees bring dates who are clearly just for show. But you two have something real. Oliver felt his chest tighten with guilt and something else. A dangerous warmth at the idea that he and Riley looked like they belonged together. We're very lucky, Riley said softly, her eyes meeting Oliver's with an expression that looked startlingly genuine. The cocktail hour flowed around them in a blur of introductions and small talk. Riley was brilliant, Oliver realized. She remembered names effortlessly, asked follow-up questions that showed she'd been listening, and somehow made Oliver look like a thoughtful partner without making it seem effortful. When Marcus Webb, Henderson Group's head of marketing, asked about their future plans, Riley deflected with exactly the right amount of privacy and affection. We're still figuring things out, she said, her hand finding Oliver's with practiced ease. But we're happy. That's what matters right now. To happiness, Marcus toasted, raising his wine glass. And to partnerships that work. Dinner was a more formal affair, with assigned seating that placed Oliver and Riley at a table with Bob Henderson himself, along with 3 other senior executives and their spouses. The conversation ranged from business strategy to family updates, and Riley navigated it all with the skill of someone who'd clearly done extensive research. Your girlfriend is impressive, Bob murmured to Oliver during the salad course. Smart, engaging, clearly understands the business world. You chose well. Oliver glanced across the table at Riley, who was deep in conversation with Emma Henderson about wedding planning. She was gesturing with her fork, making some point about venue selection that had Emma nodding enthusiastically, and she looked so naturally a part of this world that Oliver almost forgot she was acting. Yeah, he said quietly. I got lucky. Luck has nothing to do with it, Bob replied. Good relationships are about compatibility, shared values, mutual respect. Your app might predict compatibility, but it takes real wisdom to recognize it when you find it. The irony was almost too much to bear. Here was Bob Henderson, praising Oliver's relationship wisdom while Oliver sat beside a woman he was paying to pretend to love him. Riley mentioned you two are getting serious, Sandra added from across the table. Any thoughts about taking the next step? Oliver nearly choked on his wine. We're taking things one day at a time. Smart approach, Bob nodded approvingly. Too many young people rush into things without really knowing each other. Better to build a solid foundation first. Riley caught Oliver's eye across the table, her expression warm and slightly amused, as if she found his discomfort endearing rather than concerning. The look was so natural, so genuinely affectionate, that Oliver felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crack. After dinner, the group moved to the lodge's main room for coffee and casual conversation. Oliver found himself separated from Riley for the first time all evening, pulled into a discussion about HeartSync's expansion plans while she was drawn into a conversation about travel photography with several of the spouses. She's lovely, said Janet Morrison, not his assistant but Bob Henderson's wife's sister visiting for the weekend. Very genuine. You can tell she really cares about you. Oliver looked across the room at Riley, who was showing photos on her phone to an enthusiastic audience. Even from a distance, he could see the way her face lit up when she talked about places she'd been, the passion that made her beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with her appearance. She's amazing, he said and meant it completely. How long have you been together? 6 months, Oliver replied automatically, then caught himself. But it feels like longer. Like we've known each other forever. It wasn't entirely a lie. In some ways he had known Riley forever, or at least he'd known the girl she'd been, the curiosity and intelligence and warmth that still shone through her professional polish. That's how you know it's real, Janet said with the wisdom of someone who'd been married for 30 years. When time stops mattering because you can't imagine your life without them. Oliver's chest tightened. He could imagine his life without Riley, he'd been living it for 15 years. But sitting here, watching her laugh with strangers who were already charmed by her, he realized he didn't want to imagine it anymore. Are you feeling the chemistry? Drop a comment if you think Oliver's falling for Riley all over again. And hit that notification bell, you won't want to miss what happens next. Oliver. Riley's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. She was approaching with 2 cups of coffee, her smile bright and natural. I was just telling everyone about that hiking trip we took last month. Oliver accepted the coffee gratefully, using the moment to collect himself. Which one? Mount Pilchuck, Riley said smoothly. You remember, we got caught in that sudden rainstorm and had to take shelter under that overhang for 2 hours. Oliver had never been to Mount Pilchuck with Riley, but he nodded along, impressed by her ability to create believable shared memories on the spot. It was actually perfect, Riley continued, settling beside him on the couch with the easy intimacy of a longtime couple. We just talked for hours. About everything and nothing. That's when I knew. Knew what? Asked Emma Henderson, clearly invested in the romantic story. Riley looked at Oliver, her expression soft and genuine. That I was falling in love with him. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Oliver forgot how to breathe. Riley's eyes were warm and sincere, and even though he knew it was performance, even though he knew she was playing a role, the way she looked at him made his heart race like he was 16 again. That's beautiful, Sandra sighed. You can see it in how you look at each other. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Oliver remained hyper-aware of Riley beside him. The way she leaned into him when she laughed, how her hand found his knee when she was making a point, the casual intimacy that felt so natural he almost believed it himself. As the evening wound down and people began drifting toward their rooms, Bob Henderson approached Oliver with the satisfied expression of a man whose expectations had been exceeded. Wonderful evening, he said, shaking Oliver's hand warmly. Riley's delightful. You're a lucky man. Thank you, sir. I think so too. We'll talk more tomorrow about the partnership details, but I have to say, seeing you tonight, seeing how grounded and happy you are, it reinforces everything we believe about HeartSync's mission. Bob's smile was genuine. Family values aren't just about marketing, Oliver. They're about understanding that the best things in life are built on real connections, real commitment. Oliver nodded, guilt twisting in his stomach. Absolutely. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a full day. As Bob walked away, Riley appeared at Oliver's side, slipping her arm through his with practiced ease. Ready to call it a night? She asked. The walk back to their suite was quiet, both of them processing the evening's performance. Oliver's mind was spinning with everything that had happened, the easy way Riley had fit into his world, the genuine warmth in her interactions, the moment when she'd said she was falling in love with him and made it sound so real that Oliver's heart had forgotten it was fiction. You were incredible tonight, he said as they reached their door. Riley's smile was tired but pleased. Thank you. You weren't bad yourself. Very convincing devoted boyfriend. Inside their suite, the king bed loomed large and unavoidable. They discussed the sleeping arrangements earlier. Riley would take the bed, Oliver would take the couch. But now, faced with the reality of sharing intimate space, both of them seemed uncertain. Oliver gestured toward the bathroom. Of course. Take your time. When Oliver emerged 10 minutes later in pajama pants and a t-shirt, Riley was already in bed, wearing what appeared to be silk pajamas and reading something on her tablet. She looked up when he appeared, and for a moment something passed between them, an awareness of the strangeness of the situation, the intimacy of sharing space with someone who was both familiar and foreign. Couch looks comfortable, she said lightly. It's fine, Oliver replied, though the couch was clearly designed for sitting rather than sleeping. Riley watched him arrange pillows and blankets with the kind of careful attention that suggested she was thinking about something other than his comfort. Oliver, she said finally. Yeah. Tonight when I talked about falling in love. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. I want you to know that wasn't entirely performance. Oliver went very still. What do you mean? Riley was quiet for a long moment, her fingers playing with the edge of her tablet. I mean that spending time with you, seeing who you've become, it's bringing back feelings I thought I'd buried a long time ago. Riley. I know this is complicated, she continued quickly. I know this is supposed to be professional and I know you're paying me to be here. But I also know that what happened tonight, the way we were together, the way it felt, that wasn't fake. At least not for me. Oliver stared at her, his heart pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it across the room. Are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we should talk about what this really is, Riley said softly. Because if we're going to spend tomorrow pretending to be in love, I think we should be honest about the fact that maybe we're not pretending as much as we thought. The silence stretched between them, loaded with 15 years of history and 2 days of carefully constructed fiction that was beginning to feel dangerously real. We should get some sleep, Oliver said finally, though sleep felt impossible. Big day tomorrow. Riley nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on his face. Good night, Oliver. Good night. Oliver settled onto the couch and listened to Riley turn off her light, the room falling into darkness except for the moonlight streaming through the windows. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman in the bed across the room, the girl who'd explained quantum physics with candy metaphors, the professional who just admitted that their fake relationship was beginning to feel real. Oliver woke to the sound of Riley moving quietly around the suite, already dressed in athletic wear and pulling her hair back into a ponytail. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold that made her look like something from a dream. Morning, she said softly when she noticed he was awake. Couples massage starts in an hour. The word sent a jolt of awareness through Oliver's sleep-fogged brain. Couples massage. He'd known it was on the schedule, had even agreed to it during the planning phase, but now, faced with the reality of lying half-naked beside Riley while strangers touched them both, his mouth went dry. Coffee? Riley asked, holding up a steaming mug with the kind of casual domesticity that made Oliver's chest tighten. Please. She handed him the coffee, black, exactly how he liked it, and settled into the chair across from him. In the morning light, without makeup and with her hair loose around her shoulders, she looked impossibly young, like the girl he'd fallen for in high school. About last night, she began. Riley. Let me finish. Her voice was gentle but firm. I meant what I said. This is getting complicated in ways I didn't expect. But we still have a job to do today, and I'm not going to let my personal feelings compromise your business deal. Oliver studied her face, searching for clues about what she was really thinking. So we pretend last night didn't happen? We acknowledge that it happened and we deal with the implications later. Riley's smile was soft but professional. Today we focus on convincing Bob Henderson that you're exactly the kind of man he wants to partner with. The spa was a short walk from the main lodge, nestled among towering pines with the kind of rustic luxury that made everything feel both intimate and expensive. Oliver and Riley were greeted by two massage therapists, a middle-aged woman named Sarah and a younger man named David, who led them to a couples treatment room with side-by-side tables and soft music playing in the background. First time? Sarah asked cheerfully as she handed them robes and pointed toward changing areas. Yes, Riley replied with a smile that looked completely natural. We're excited. Oliver was decidedly not excited. He was terrified. The prospect of lying beside Riley, listening to her soft sighs of relaxation, trying not to think about the fact that she was barely covered by a sheet. It felt like torture disguised as team building. You're very tense, David observed 5 minutes into the massage, working at a particularly stubborn knot in Oliver's shoulders. Big presentation coming up, Oliver muttered, which wasn't entirely a lie. He always carries stress in his shoulders, Riley said from the table beside him, her voice already soft with relaxation. I keep telling him to take breaks from his computer. It was exactly the kind of detail a concerned girlfriend would worry about. The fact that it was also completely accurate made Oliver's chest tighten in ways that had nothing to do with muscle tension. You're lucky to have someone who pays attention, Sarah said warmly. Most people don't notice the little things. Riley's laugh was soft and knowing. Oliver notices everything. He just doesn't always notice when he's pushing himself too hard. The conversation drifted to other topics. Weekend plans, the beautiful weather, recommendations for local hiking trails. But Oliver remained hyper-aware of Riley beside him. The soft sound she made as Sarah worked on her shoulders, the way she turned her head toward him so they could maintain eye contact during the conversation. Better? David asked as the session wound down. Oliver had to admit that he did feel more relaxed, though whether that was due to the massage or simply spending an hour in Riley's presence, he wasn't sure. Much better, he said. Thank you. You two are sweet together, Sarah observed as they prepared to leave. Very comfortable with each other. You can tell you really care about one another. Riley's smile was warm and genuine. We do. The trust exercises were held in a meadow behind the lodge, with the entire Henderson group gathered in a circle for what their facilitator, an enthusiastic woman named Carol, called partnership building activities. Trust is the foundation of any successful relationship, Carol announced, her voice carrying across the group. Today we're going to explore what it means to truly rely on someone else. The first exercise was simple enough. Partners taking turns falling backward, trusting the other to catch them. Oliver watched other couples go through the motions, some laughing nervously, others approaching it with serious concentration. Ready? Riley asked when their turn came. Oliver nodded, positioning himself behind her. Riley stood with her back to him, arms crossed over her chest, and without hesitation, let herself fall backward into his arms. She trusted him completely without question or doubt. The weight of her in his arms, the way she relaxed against him with absolute confidence, it was both humbling and terrifying. "Your turn," she said softly. Oliver had never been good at letting go of control, at trusting anyone else to catch him when he fell. But something about Riley's steady presence, the calm certainty in her eyes, made it easier than he'd expected. He closed his eyes and fell backward, and Riley caught him effortlessly, her arms strong and sure around him. "See," she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. "I've got you." The second exercise was more challenging. A blindfolded obstacle course where one partner had to guide the other through a series of challenges using only verbal directions. "I'll guide first," Riley said, accepting the blindfold with more calm than Oliver felt. "3 steps forward," he said softly, his hands hovering near her shoulders without quite touching. "There's a rope about knee-high, step over it." Riley followed his instructions perfectly, trusting his guidance completely. Oliver found himself moving closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper as he helped her navigate around trees and under low-hanging branches. "Last obstacle," he murmured when they reached the final challenge. "You need to duck under this branch. I'll guide you." His hands moved to her head, fingers threading through her hair as he helped her navigate the low-hanging branch. The touch was gentle, practical, and absolutely devastating. When Riley pulled off the blindfold, she was standing close enough that Oliver could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell her shampoo and the lingering scent of her perfume. "How'd I do?" she asked softly. "Perfect," Oliver said. "You trusted me." Something passed between them in that moment. Something real, something that had nothing to do with performance or business arrangements. Oliver felt himself leaning closer, drawn by the warmth in her expression, the way her breath caught when she realized what was happening. "Next couple," Carol called out, breaking the spell. Riley stepped back, professional smile sliding back into place, but her cheeks were pink and she wouldn't quite meet his eyes. "Can you feel the tension building? Comment below if you think they're going to kiss before this weekend is over. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to reach its emotional peak." The afternoon hike was supposed to be leisurely, a chance for the group to enjoy the mountain scenery and bond over shared experiences. Instead, it became the moment Oliver realized he was in serious trouble. Riley had changed into hiking boots and athletic clothes that somehow made her look even more beautiful than the elegant dresses. She walked beside him on the trail, pointing out wildflowers and asking questions about the local ecosystem with the same curiosity he remembered from high school. "I always wanted to learn rock climbing," she mentioned as they paused to admire a particularly impressive cliff face. "It looks like the ultimate problem-solving exercise." "It is," Oliver said. "Every route is a puzzle. You have to read the rock, plan your moves, trust your equipment and your partner." "Sounds terrifying and exhilarating." "Yeah," he agreed, looking at her rather than the cliff. "Exactly like that." She met his gaze then, and Oliver had the distinct impression they weren't talking about climbing anymore. "I could teach you," he offered. "There's a great indoor gym in Seattle. Good place to start." "I'd like that," Riley said, and her smile was soft, genuine. "Maybe when we get back." The words hung between them, loaded with implication. "When we get back." As if there would be a we beyond this weekend, beyond this arrangement. They'd fallen behind the main group, walking at their own pace through a section of trail that wound between towering pines. The afternoon light filtered through the canopy above, creating patterns of shadow and gold that made everything feel dreamlike. "Riley," Oliver said suddenly. She looked at him, eyebrows raised in question. "Why do you do this? The stand-in work, I mean. You're obviously brilliant, you could do anything." Riley was quiet for so long that Oliver thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "I was engaged once," she said. 3 years ago. David. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, successful, romantic. The whole package. Oliver felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he remained silent, letting her talk. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found him with someone else. My maid of honor, actually. Riley's laugh was bitter. When I confronted him, he said I was too closed off, too guarded. That he never felt like he really knew me. Riley. So I decided he was right, she continued, her pace slowing as they walked. I was closed off. Love was just performance anyway, might as well get paid for it. She glanced at him. I got very good at playing the part of the perfect girlfriend. Turns out, when you don't risk anything real, you can't get hurt. Oliver wanted to tell her that David was an idiot, that anyone who couldn't see how amazing she was didn't deserve her. Instead, he found himself saying, "What if it's not performance?" Riley stopped walking entirely, turning to face him. "What do you mean? What if someone did know you? The real you? What if someone had been paying attention all along?" They were standing close now, close enough that Oliver could see the way her pulse fluttered in her throat, could see the uncertainty and hope warring in her expression. "Oliver," she whispered, "I remember everything about you, Riley. The way you explained quantum physics using candy metaphors. How you spent lunch periods in the library but always saved a seat for anyone who looked lonely. The way you were kind to the awkward kid with thick glasses even when you didn't have to be." "You weren't awkward," Riley said softly. "I was terrified," Oliver admitted. "Of you specifically. You were brilliant and beautiful and completely out of my league, and I spent 2 years wanting to ask you out and never finding the courage." Riley's eyes widened, something shifting in her expression. "You wanted to ask me out?" "I was half in love with you," Oliver said quietly. The sweet, brilliant girl who made terrible science jokes seemed funny and looked at me like I was worth listening to. "Oliver," Riley breathed, stepping closer. "I wanted you to ask me out. I had the biggest crush on you. I used to time my trips to the library hoping I'd run into you. I practiced asking you to prom in my bedroom mirror." Oliver felt the world tilt. "You had a crush on me?" "I was half in love with you too," Riley corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. "The sweet, brilliant boy who built robots and made me feel like maybe being smart was something to be proud of instead of something to hide." They were standing so close now that Oliver could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, could see the way her lips parted slightly as she looked up at him. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "Terrible idea," Oliver agreed. And then he kissed her. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the performance they'd been putting on all weekend. It was real and honest and 15 years in the making. Riley's hands came up to frame his face, and Oliver thought dimly that this was what he'd been waiting for his entire adult life. When they broke apart, Riley rested her forehead against his, her breathing unsteady. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "I don't know," Oliver admitted. "But I know I don't want this weekend to end." Riley's smile was soft, genuine, completely free of performance. "Me neither." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the dappled sunlight, both of them trying to process what had just happened. Somewhere in the distance they could hear the voices of the other hikers, but it felt like they were alone in the world. "We should catch up with the group," Riley said finally, though she made no move to step away. "Probably," Oliver agreed, but he didn't let go of her either. When they finally rejoined the others, Oliver was sure that everyone would be able to see the change in them, would know that something fundamental had shifted. But the other couples were too absorbed in their own conversations to notice, and Bob Henderson simply smiled approvingly when he saw them walking hand in hand. "Beautiful trail," he commented. "Perfect day for a hike." "Perfect," Oliver agreed, looking at Riley rather than the scenery. As they made their way back to the lodge, Oliver realized that somewhere between the trust exercises and the mountain trail, their fake relationship had become something else entirely. The formal dinner transformed the rustic lodge into something magical. Candles flickered on every table, string lights twinkled overhead, and the mountain views through the floor-to-ceiling windows provided a backdrop that belonged in a fairy tale. Oliver adjusted his tie for the third time, watching Riley put the finishing touches on her makeup in their suite's mirror. She wore a midnight blue dress that made her eyes look like starlight, her hair swept up in an elegant twist that left her neck bare. When she turned to face him, Oliver forgot how to breathe. "Ready?" she asked, but her voice was softer than usual, less professional. Everything had changed since their kiss on the hiking trail. The careful distance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by an awareness that crackled between them like electricity. Riley's smiles were genuine now, her touches lingering, and Oliver found himself drowning in possibilities he'd never dared imagine. "You look incredible," he said. Riley's cheeks flushed pink. "Thank you." The dining room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Bob Henderson had spared no expense. A live jazz quartet played in the corner, wine flowed freely, and the menu featured dishes that belonged in a five-star restaurant. Oliver and Riley were seated at the head table with the Henderson family, a position of honor that wasn't lost on anyone present. "To new partnerships," Bob announced, raising his glass as the main course was served. "And to the people who make them possible." The toast was clearly directed at Oliver, and he felt the weight of 43 pairs of eyes watching him. This was it, the moment when months of negotiation would either pay off or crumble. Everything depended on convincing these people that he understood what they valued most: authentic relationships built on trust and commitment. To partnerships, Oliver replied, his hand finding Riley's under the table. And to the people who teach us what really matters. Riley's fingers intertwined with his, and when she smiled, it was radiant and completely real. Dinner conversation flowed around topics of family, tradition, and the future of business in an increasingly digital world. Riley contributed thoughtfully, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. When Emma Henderson mentioned her upcoming wedding, Riley's enthusiasm was infectious. "Have you thought about destination weddings?" Riley asked. "I've always thought there's something magical about celebrating love in a place that takes your breath away." "Actually, we're considering Italy," Emma replied, her eyes lighting up. "Tuscany maybe. Somewhere romantic and timeless." "Perfect choice," Riley said warmly. "Love should be celebrated somewhere as beautiful as the feeling itself." Oliver watched Riley engage with Emma, noting the wistful quality in her voice when she talked about love and celebration. He wondered if she was thinking about her own failed engagement, about the wedding that never happened, about dreams that had been shattered by betrayal. As if sensing his thoughts, Riley glanced at him, her expression soft and questioning. Oliver squeezed her hand gently, a silent reassurance that seemed to settle something in her eyes. When the dancing began, Oliver found himself on the dance floor despite his earlier protests. Riley had been right, everyone was expected to participate, and she guided him through the steps with patient grace. "See," she murmured as they swayed to a slow ballad. "Not so terrible." "You're a good teacher," Oliver replied, his hands resting on her waist. "You're a good student." Her expression grew thoughtful. "You always were." There it was again, that slip, that acknowledgement of their shared past. But this time Riley didn't try to cover it up or deflect. Instead, she looked directly into his eyes. "I remember everything too," she said quietly. "Every conversation, every moment you made me feel like being smart was something special instead of something to hide." Oliver's heart raced. "Riley." "I lied earlier," she continued, her voice barely audible over the music. "When I said I didn't recognize you. I knew who you were the moment I walked into your office. I couldn't believe it was really you. Why didn't you say anything?" Riley's smile was sad and beautiful. "Because I was scared. Because seeing you again brought back all these feelings I thought I'd buried. Because I've spent 3 years building walls to protect myself, and you walked back into my life and made them all crumble in 5 minutes." The song ended, but they remained on the dance floor, lost in each other's eyes while couples moved around them. "We should talk," Oliver said finally. Riley nodded. "Yes, we should. Your heart is racing, isn't it?" "Mine too." Comment below if you think they're finally going to be completely honest with each other. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. They slipped away from the party as the evening wound down, making polite excuses about getting some air. The lodge's private balcony overlooked the mountains, and the night was clear enough to see stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Riley leaned against the railing, her profile illuminated by moonlight. "This isn't what I expected," she said softly. "The retreat. This job." She gestured between them. "Usually these arrangements are more performative, artificial. But tonight felt real," Oliver finished. Riley nodded, not looking at him. "Yeah, real." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the weight of the admission. "Can I ask you something?" Oliver said finally. Riley tensed slightly but nodded. "Why do you really do this work? And don't say it's because love is just performance. I've seen you tonight, the way you talked about Emma's wedding, the way you looked when you mentioned celebrating love. You still believe in it." Riley was quiet for so long that Oliver thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because it's safer," she said. "When you're performing love, you can control it. You can turn it on and off, you can walk away when the job is done, you can't get hurt because none of it's real." She finally looked at him. "But you're right. I do still believe in love. I stopped believing I deserved it." Oliver felt something break open in his chest. "Riley." "David wasn't wrong," she continued. "I was closed off. I was guarded. But not because I didn't care, because I cared too much. Because I'd been hurt before in smaller ways, and I learned that it was easier to keep people at arm's length than to risk being rejected." "What happened before David?" Riley's laugh was bitter. "High school actually. There was this boy I had a crush on. Sweet, brilliant, completely out of my league. I spent 2 years wanting to tell him how I felt, but I was too scared. Too worried that he'd think I was just being nice, or that I'd ruin our friendship, or that he'd reject me and I'd have to see him every day knowing I wasn't good enough. Oliver's heart stopped. Riley. So I did nothing, she said. And he graduated and went to college and I never saw him again. And I told myself it was better that way, that at least I hadn't been rejected. But really, I just learned that wanting something wasn't enough. You had to be brave enough to reach for it. What if he wanted to reach for you too? Oliver asked quietly. What if he was just as scared, just as convinced that you were out of his league? Riley turned to look at him fully, something shifting in her expression. What if he was? What if he spent 15 years wondering what might have happened if he'd been brave enough to ask you to prom? What if he built a successful company and dated other women and told himself he was happy, but never quite forgot the girl who made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was interesting enough to deserve her attention? Riley's breath caught. Oliver. What if seeing you again made him realize that he'd never really moved on? That every relationship since then had been him trying to find someone who made him feel the way you did when you were 17? They were standing close now, close enough that Oliver could see the tears gathering in Riley's eyes. What if she felt exactly the same way? Riley whispered. What if she'd been comparing every man to a memory of a boy who was kind and brilliant and made her laugh? What if she took this job because she couldn't resist the chance to spend time with him, even if it was fake? Then maybe, Oliver said softly, they should stop pretending and try something real. Riley's smile was tremulous and beautiful. That sounds terrifying. Terrifying, Oliver agreed, stepping closer. And perfect. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their kiss on the hiking trail. This was a promise, a beginning, a choice to be brave enough to reach for something real. When they broke apart, Riley rested her forehead against his. What happens now? She asked. Now, Oliver said, we figure out how to turn the best fake relationship either of us has ever had into something genuine. Riley laughed, the sound bright and joyful. I think I'd like that. Even if it means giving up your career as a professional fake girlfriend? Especially if it means that, Riley said firmly. I'm tired of performing love, Oliver. I want to live it. Oliver kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, the mountains stood silent witness to two people who'd finally found the courage to stop hiding behind carefully constructed walls. Sunday morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the suite windows and the sound of Riley humming softly in the bathroom. Oliver lay in bed, the actual bed where they'd fallen asleep talking until nearly dawn, and marveled at how different everything felt. No more careful distances. No more professional boundaries. Just Riley brushing her teeth in his t-shirt, her hair messy from sleep, looking more beautiful than any performance could ever be. Coffee? She called out, and Oliver's heart did something ridiculous at the casual domesticity of it all. Please. The checkout process felt surreal. Bob Henderson shook Oliver's hand with genuine warmth, his approval evident in every word. Wonderful weekend, he said. Riley's a treasure, Oliver. You're a lucky man. I know, Oliver replied and meant it completely. We'll have the partnership contracts ready by Wednesday. I have to say, seeing you this weekend, seeing how grounded and happy you are, it reinforces everything we believe about HeartSync's mission. As they loaded their luggage into the rental car, Riley caught Oliver's hand. No regrets? She asked softly. About the weekend? About us? About any of it? Any of it. Oliver looked back at the lodge where they'd spent 3 days pretending to be in love and ended up finding the real thing. Not a single one. The drive back to Seattle was different from their arrival. Easier, filled with comfortable conversation and the kind of planning that came naturally to people building something together. Riley had already started researching indoor climbing gyms, and Oliver found himself describing his favorite hiking trails with the enthusiasm of someone who finally had someone to share them with. So, Riley said as they reached the city limits, what happens to my career as a professional fake girlfriend? Well, Oliver said thoughtfully, I think you're about to become unemployed in that particular field. Good, Riley said firmly. I was getting tired of pretending anyway. Are you smiling as big as I am right now? Drop a heart in the comments if you believe in second chances and love that's worth the wait. And make sure you're subscribed because this ending is going to make your heart soar. They returned the rental car and stood in the airport parking garage, suddenly uncertain about the logistics of transitioning from fake couple to real one. I should probably go home, Riley said. Get some real clothes, process everything that happened. Right. Of course. Oliver felt a flutter of panic. But we'll see each other again? Soon. Riley's smile was radiant. Oliver Jones, are you asking me on a real date? I'm asking you on the first real date of hopefully many real dates. Then yes, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. I'd love to have dinner with you. As us. Riley and Oliver. No performance, no arrangement. Just us, Oliver agreed. Just us. 6 months later. The climbing gym was busy for a Tuesday evening, filled with people challenging themselves against colorful holds and artificial rock faces. Oliver belayed Riley as she worked her way up a particularly challenging route, calling out encouragement and watching her problem-solve her way through each move. You're getting good at this, he said when she rappelled down, her face flushed with exertion and triumph. I have an excellent teacher, she replied, kissing him quickly before moving to untie her harness. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past 6 months, climbing twice a week, cooking together on weekends, building something real from the foundation of something that had started as performance. Riley had transitioned her consulting business toward legitimate event planning, discovering that she had a talent for creating genuine celebrations rather than manufactured ones. HeartSync had gone public 3 months earlier with record-breaking numbers, the Henderson Group partnership proving even more successful than projected. But Oliver's favorite metric wasn't in any quarterly report, it was the way Riley looked at him over morning coffee, the way she laughed at his terrible science jokes, the way she'd moved into his apartment without either of them making a formal decision about it. Dinner? He asked as they gathered their gear. Thai food. Riley suggested with a grin. Always, Oliver agreed. As they walked out into the Seattle evening, hands linked and comfortable in each other's presence, Oliver reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. He'd hired Riley to fake love him for a weekend, and instead she taught him what real love actually felt like. It was messy and uncertain and completely unscripted. It was built on honesty instead of algorithms, on vulnerability instead of performance, on the courage to reach for something real even when it scared them both. It was love, debugged and running perfectly. You know, Riley said as they reached Oliver's car, I never did get paid for that weekend. Oliver looked down at her, eyebrows raised. Are you invoicing me? I'm considering it. $15,000 for services rendered. What services? Oliver asked, opening her car door with exaggerated gallantry. You fell for me completely by accident. That wasn't in the contract. Riley settled into the passenger seat, her eyes warm with love and laughter. Maybe it was the best accident I ever made. Oliver leaned down to kiss her properly, slow and sweet and completely real. Definitely the best code I never wrote. Riley laughed, the sound bright and joyful, and Oliver thought that maybe, just maybe, some problems were too beautiful to solve. They were perfect exactly as they were, complex, real, and absolutely worth every risk they'd taken to find each other. Thank you for joining Oliver and Riley on their journey from fake love to real forever. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narratives for more tales of love, second chances, and the courage to be vulnerable. What's your favorite moment from their story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the best love stories begin with the courage to pretend, and end with the bravery to be real. Until next time, keep believing in love that's worth the wait.